When we picture the vertebrate brain, it's really easy to just imagine it as this static, finished organs sitting in our heads. But to really understand how we think, feel, and react to the world around us, we have to look at it totally differently. It's actually a dynamic, deeply evolutionary toolkit that's been constantly upgrading itself for hundreds of millions of years. Think about the incredible scale of this journey for a second. We're talking about an evolutionary leap from microscopic, simple nerve nets drifting around in ancient oceans, all the way to the staggering complexity of human cognition that's quite literally capable of exploring the stars. And the single, ultimate goal driving every single one of those biological upgrades across the eons: survival.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is a roadmap for this explainer. First up, survival of the fastest. Second, the evolutionary brain blueprint. Third, the forebrain advantage. Fourth, the limbic system and emotion. And finally, we'll wrap up with seeing inside the mind.
Section 1. Survival of the fastest, reflexes versus cognition.
To really appreciate complex cognition, we first have to understand the original operating system of the nervous system. Long before the brain was out there solving complex equations or composing symphonies, it had one primary job: dealing with immediate physical threats. And in those split-second life-or-death moments, speed is absolutely everything. There's this fundamental evolutionary trade-off between speed and analytical power. Think about it like this. If you accidentally touch a hot stove, you don't stop and ponder the temperature or the exact physics of heat transfer, right? A simple reflex network takes that sensory information and activates motor neurons directly via your spinal cord. It completely bypasses the brain for a rapid, involuntary response. Why? Well, because sending a signal all the way up your arm into the brain for processing and then back down again takes precious milliseconds, and those are milliseconds that could result in severe, life-threatening tissue damage. But on the flip side, if you're trying to solve a complex math problem, you absolutely need that cognitive forebrain. It's a much slower, voluntary process that handles advanced integration. Basically, you're sacrificing pure survival speed for profound analytical capability.
Moving on to Section 2, the evolutionary brain blueprint, building the brain.
So how exactly did we get from simple, involuntary reflexes to that massive processing power? Well, this definitely wasn't an overnight change. That basic operating system got some incredible hardware expansions over the course of millions of years. Let's look at the timeline and see how this builds. Over 500 million years ago, simple, diffuse nerve nets emerged in creatures like hydras, which is really just a basic web of sensors spread out evenly across the body. Then came a massive game changer called cephalization. This was the process of clustering those sensory neurons right at the front, or the anterior end of the body. This was huge for survival because organisms really needed to sense the environment they were moving into first, before the rest of their body followed along. It just makes sense. And this naturally led to the creation of a head, and eventually a highly centralized brain. Ultimately, this centralized hub paved the exact path for the massive expansion of the forebrain that we see today in birds and mammals. And when we look across different species, we see this absolute, unbreakable biological rule: form equals function. The size of particular brain regions perfectly matches a species' survival needs. Take a rayfin fish, for example. It explores its environment using a lateral line system specifically to detect water currents. Because of that, it has a highly developed, dominant midbrain customized exactly for processing visual and water current data. Now contrast that with a mammalian brain. A mammal relies heavily on complex processing, social learning, and adaptability to survive in constantly shifting environments. And the result? A massively expanded forebrain. The hardware quite literally always matches the habitat.
Section 3, the forebrain advantage, the evolution of cognition.
Now, that brings us to a really critical evolutionary leap. Mammals and birds specifically leveled up their hardware. They didn't just adapt to their environments, they evolved to completely dominate them through higher-order reasoning and advanced cognition. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer scale of the investment in that higher-order reasoning. In humans, the cerebral cortex, which is that outer layer of the cerebrum, vital for perception, voluntary movement, and learning, accounts for a staggering 80% of our total brain mass. 80%! It's an incredible data processing advantage that physically overshadows the rest of the brain's architecture. And this massive, intricate forebrain is exactly what allows mammals to develop complex social behaviors, navigate really intricate group dynamics, and problem-solve their way out of almost any environmental challenge you throw at them. But here is where the story gets super fascinating. We've all heard the insult bird brain, right? Well, science completely turns that on its head. For a really long time, scientists assumed that an extensively convoluted layered cerebral cortex, just like ours, was the absolute only way to achieve high-level intelligence. But evolution actually found two completely distinct structural paths. While mammals use 6 parallel layers of neurons arranged right on the brain's surface, the avian brain relies on a clustered organization of neurons buried deep within a region called the pallium. So they completely lack our convoluted cortex, but they certainly don't lack intelligence. In fact, birds are brilliant problem solvers. Think about this. Western scrub jays can actually remember the exact chronological order of where they hid specific food items. New Caledonian crows literally manufacture and use physical tools to survive, a skill that we once thought was totally exclusive to humans and apes. And African gray parrots can understand highly abstract concepts, including the numerical concept of none. It's just absolute, undeniable proof that a folded cortex isn't the only biological recipe for genius out there. Section 4, the limbic system and emotion, wired for survival. Now, while the forebrain is busy handling all of that high-level logic and reasoning, we also possess a deeply visceral, incredibly powerful set of survival tools. Let's pivot for a second to something we all experience constantly, but rarely think of as a strict biological mechanism: our emotions. Emotion is deeply ingrained in a network called the limbic system, and sitting right at the center of this is the amygdala. This is a small, almond-shaped structure that records emotional experiences as memories. If you encounter a truly terrifying situation, the amygdala stores that exact data. If you ever face a similar threat again, the amygdala basically hijacks your nervous system. It forces a physical reaction, triggering fear, sweating, and a faster heart rate instantly, long before your logical forebrain even realizes what's happening. And it does this to ensure you stay alive. So, the crucial point here is that our deepest, most abstract feelings aren't just poetic, they are highly practical, biological tools. Structures in the forebrain quite literally attach emotional feelings to basic survival functions just to motivate us. The feeling of fear? It keeps us away from danger. The feeling of pleasure? It actively rewards us for finding food or mates. And we know exactly how vital this hardware is by observing what happens when it's broken. Imagine a fire alarm where the red light flashes, but the loud siren is totally disconnected. That's kind of what happens here. Clinical observations show that if a person's amygdala is damaged, their explicit memory remains completely fine. They can perfectly remember seeing a dangerous or unpleasant image, but their autonomic arousal just disappears. Their heart rate doesn't jump, and they don't break a sweat. The cognitive memory is completely there, but that emotional survival alarm is just disconnected. Section 5. Seeing inside the mind. Functional imaging. For most of human history, all these internal structures were a complete and total mystery. I mean, we could observe behavior, sure, but we couldn't observe the living brain actually at work. Today, however, humanity is using its massively advanced forebrain to look back into its own structural wiring. Which brings us to a really phenomenal question. How do we actually see a working, thinking, feeling brain without, opening up the skull? The big breakthrough came with functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, and the logic behind it is just brilliantly simple. First, a subject performs a specific task, like looking at a face or maybe solving a puzzle. Second, blood flow naturally increases to the specific region of the brain that's working hard on that task. Third, a massive magnet detects that localized rush of oxygen-rich blood. And finally, doctors can take that localized blood flow and turn it into a live, glowing map of human cognition. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact emotional centers we were just talking about. In one amazing fMRI study, researchers mapped the brains of people who were just listening to music. When the subjects listened to sad music, the scanner detected increased blood flow right there in the amygdala. But when they listened to happy music, the blood rushed straight to the nucleus accumbens, which is a structure vital for perceiving pleasure. We can quite literally watch emotions light up on a screen in real time. But look, this imaging is way more than just a fascinating window into our feelings. It's practically our newest survival tool. Doctors are actively using fMRI to map and heal severe nervous system disorders. They can monitor exactly how a brain is rewiring itself while a patient recovers from a stroke. They can map out the abnormal activity that causes severe migraines and even map completely safe zones to increase the precision of incredibly complex brain surgeries. And maybe, most incredibly, they can detect the earliest functional signs of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. By spotting these really subtle changes in brain activity long before massive tissue loss occurs, doctors get a massive head start in treating one of the most devastating conditions of the human mind. So we have traveled all the way from simple nerve nets drifting in ancient oceans to a brain so intensely complex it possesses an estimated 100 billion neurons, making something like 100 trillion connections. And now, for the very first time in our evolutionary history, our species has the tools to watch its own mind at work. As we continue to map these pathways and really begin to understand the deepest mechanics of our own hardware, we have to ask, how will understanding our own brains alter the future evolution of human cognition? It's a pretty fascinating thought to leave you with today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will catch you next time.